Warning, some material may be inappropriate for younger viewers. Welcome to the Storytellers,
Here we discuss movies, books, and games.
and all things stories. I'm Nate,
And I'm Brian.
and today we're going to discuss the 2018 horror film Hereditary. This film was directed by first-time writer-director Ari Aster and stars Toni Collette, who you might recognize as the mother from The Sixth Sense. It also stars Gabrielle Byrne, who is from The Usual Suspects, End of Days, and Stigmata. And then we have two relative unknowns, Alex Wolff as the son, and this movie introduces the creepy girl you saw from the trailers, Millie Shapiro, as the ill-fated Charlie.
Yes.
Well, Brian, do you want to give us a short summary of Hereditary?
Yes, it's a great family film. First of all, that's how I'm going to put it.
It is a family film. There's only basically 4 or 5 actors in the film, pretty much.
Yes, it's basically a story of a family who's basically been it's so not even so much cursed, but being manipulated towards an end goal of basically putting a demon inside of a human vessel. That's how I would describe it.
If you haven't seen the film yet, I suggest you get out and go watch it right now and then come back and listen to us bullshit about it.
Yes, because I mean it was put out in 2018, so I mean it's been a while. So
It's been almost a year since it came out. This one went by me until you're like, hey, you need to watch this, because I saw the trailers and I'm like, oh, this is just another one of those jump scare movies, and like I thought the trailer totally misrepresented what the movie is. What do you think?
I think they focused as it going to be about Charlie the whole way, which obviously she's a very small part in the beginning.
An important part,
Yes,
but it's not
important.
like
She's not the focus.
it comes
of the
across as like, oh, it's a creepy little girl movie. It's like Annabelle or Chucky or The Boy. There's a lot of these what I considered crappy disposable horror films, and I had no interest in paying $10 to see it.
Yeah.
And so you let me watch the Blu-ray, and it really blew me away.
Yes.
I was floored by this film. It does almost everything correctly.
It does it, and I mean not only from the acting, which is spectacular, to just the basic cinematography of the film. I mean it's really greatly composed, shot.
So the story begins with we come in from black and we're looking at a typed paragraph that is the obituary of this woman who has died.
Yes.
So coming into this cold, I'm like sitting here reading this, like taking all this information in. If I had one negative thing to say about that is I don't feel like it's on the screen long enough. I'm a decent reader, but I'm not like a super fast reader, and like to absorb it, the first time I watched it, I rewound it and paused it so I could make sure I had everything. I don't know if it's like super important information because there's a lot of visual storytelling in this, but we basically open with a funeral. Just before that, the daughter character, Charlie, who's this 12, 13-year-old little girl who is, I don't know, weird and backward and kind of keeps to herself. She has a tree house.
Yeah.
And her mother she gets scorned for staying out there when it's cold and like being out there by herself. And father character, Steve, played by Gabrielle Byrne, has to coax her out of the treehouse to get ready to come to the funeral, which is funny because there's no getting ready involved. I think she wears that same sweatshirt like the whole movie, doesn't she? That tattered orange like hoodie.
She wore that quite a bit, but she was dressed up for the funeral when she did get there. She was dressed up for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just remember that hoodie's in a lot of scenes.
Yes.
So they go to the funeral, and Here's where like a lot of the story of this film is like in the subtext.
Yeah.
The main character, I say, is the mother character, Annie.
Yeah.
Played by Toni Collette. Her mother has just died of a long-term illness. I don't think they ever really say what it was.
Dementia, but
she had dementia, but she was in hospice, and Annie was taking care of her mother, and so she's giving the eulogy, she's basically is confessing that like her mother, she was never really that close to her mother, and just talking about her makes her feel like she's betraying her privacy. She was a private woman who had her own private rituals, which when you just hear this, you're like, okay, this is like this little things like saying private rituals, like that, like has like a more like, it's not just like, oh, she did this at a certain time or did this, like we have our rituals getting ready for the day. No, we're actually talking about actual spellcrafting rituals, but we don't know this at the time.
Yeah. And the other statement in that speech is, there's so many faces I don't recognize here.
Mm-hmm.
Because
she says her mother would even be surprised. She was surprised, and maybe her mother would be surprised by the turnout.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of strangers.
Her mother would definitely not have been surprised.
No, she wouldn't have, but our main character, Annie, is surprised. There's all these strangers there.
Yeah.
And we learn that her young daughter, Charlie, has some angst, and she draws on a sketchbook.
Yes, and what's interesting to me is that the mother's very artistic, the daughter's very artistic, and we'll go into that a little bit later on with some of the things near the end of the movie that can tie that artistic ability into.
Well, artistic ability. Let's talk about that opening shot.
Oh yes, it's
so Toni Collette, Annie the mother, is a model maker. As a profession, she makes like dioramas and models of like different like aspects of her life, and so she, I guess, makes money by going to an art gallery, and these are like I don't know, they're like probably like small, like I don't know, Star Wars miniature, 3/4 quarter-inch action figure like size scale miniatures, and the camera like slowly dollies in on this house, which is like a cutaway, so it's like a dollhouse, and you can see all the rooms in the house, and it zooms in until it comes on this messy bedroom, and then the door opens, and then the father walks in, and now it's like live action. And I've seen the film twice now, and you've seen it a couple times, and I was trying to see if I could like identify the moment where it switched from being a miniature to being an actual set, and I'm not quite sure how they did that.
I think there's green screen behind it.
They must have, but that's a great example of like when CGI things or special effects things like that are done correctly, you don't notice it, and it's just a great little. It's neat. It's a neat shot. It also sets up what she does for a living,
and it takes its time. It is not like they zoom in extremely fast. It takes its time. It slowly goes in, and it builds dread up. Like, why are we focusing in on this? What are we looking for? And I think it represents almost like, if you look at their house, it's almost like a dollhouse itself. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you're almost looking into it. In many cases,
and also a lot of the shots are like this with these slow dollies or slow zooms to where it has a real voyeuristic quality, like you're getting like, in a way, there is, a 3-act structure and a beginning and an end, but it's also kind of like a slice of life picture. You're getting this small voyeuristic window into like the most horrible part of this family's lives, when we join the story. So you want to take us back to the funeral?
Yes, because there's one thing I do want to say. At the funeral, while Annie's talking about her mother, they have a picture of her.
Yeah.
See up there. And if you look at how that's framed, it's almost like her mother's like looking in through a window into the funeral itself. Because even though her mother's passed away, her mother's presence really looms large over this whole film, I think.
I agree, which is it's kind of a neat trick that they were able to accomplish, because the mother has no dialogue in the picture whatsoever.
No.
Right? We just hear about things that she's done.
She wrote a note.
And about how she acted, and what much of her family's been estranged from her. And but yeah, she is this kind of looming matriarchal presence over the whole picture.
Yeah. So at the funeral, everybody's coming and, obviously walking past the casket. As Charlie's walking up there, she's looking at her grandmother, and then in the background, it like focuses in on this guy who's got this weird, creepy smile looking at her.
Yeah, stranger danger is as soon as I seen it. Also, Charlie's eating a chocolate bar.
Which the father runs and goes, "Are there nuts in that?" Real quick.
And then the mother comes up and asks her again.
We don't have the EpiPen.
Right.
So she's obviously allergic to nuts.
Right. So they set up, kind of subtly that she has a nut allergy. And also she was sketching, so she draws little pictures of her grandma in the casket.
Yeah.
And her dad makes her close the book.
Yeah.
I feel like that both the father and the mother, obviously the girl is weird looking and has some kind of condition that's never discussed.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're both kind of uncomfortable around her, uncomfortable about her. Do you get that sense?
I don't think so much that. I think what it is that I think Charlie herself, who we'll go into what she really is later on, actually does not want to be bothered by people. Mm-hmm. So she just puts off this presence around her and makes everybody uncomfortable.
Right. She's very antisocial and she's kind of autistic.
Yeah.
The way she acts, I think.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been around someone who has autism, and there's obviously a spectrum, she's definitely very okay with being by herself. Yeah. And doesn't do well in social interactions, except for we come to learn that apparently the person that she was closest to was grandma.
Yeah.
Who had just died.
Yeah, and actually Peter actually understands that she likes to be left alone. He knows he always a little bit distanced from her a little.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's 4 members of this family, and all of them are kind of loners in their own right.
Yeah.
The little girl wants to be left alone to do her sketches. The boy is kind of this angsty teen growing up doing his own thing.
Yeah.
The mother works at home, spends a lot of her time in her art studio, building the miniatures, and the father's a psychiatrist, and he has an office somewhere, but I think we see that in one scene.
Yeah.
But they all kind of have their own private lives too.
Yeah. And how the house is set up, it's almost like those bedrooms are sort of I always want to say like a prison. Because you have the doors on either side, and down at the end is Peter's room. It's almost like there's no escaping that area. So it's very interesting how it's set up also. I do want to bring up this. They don't really go in at the beginning and really explain these characters at all. All this character development is done throughout the movie. It's not explained up front.
And a good chunk of it is done visually.
Yeah. So
if you're not paying attention, or you leave to go to the bathroom, you could easily come back and be lost, I think.
Yeah.
There are long moments that are, just silence or focus on a character's face or just what they're doing or how they're going about it. And kudos to all the actors, because I think it's very natural seeming. Yeah. And also, as an audience member, especially in some scenes that are more intense, and even in the quiet ones, it gives you a sense of dread and a sense of uncomfortability, like you're spying on somebody or being privy to something that you shouldn't be watching.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable at times, but it's meant to be. And it's in a good way. I mean, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable watching somebody's private life.
So after the funeral, the mother is going through boxes, right?
Yeah. Because at first they come home and she's like, should I feel sad? It makes it very upfront that maybe since she didn't get along with her mother, none of the family seemed overly upset except for Charlie that the grandmother died. Right. None of them. And she's like, should I be sad? And obviously, the husband goes, no, you need to be whatever you are.
Right.
So she then goes in and she's starting to take care of her mother's belongings. And she opens up this book. And it's a note from the grandmother saying, I'm sorry, dear, hopefully you understand the sacrifices that are about to come.
That I've had to make.
And they'll be worth it.
Right, the rewards will be worth the sacrifice, basically is what it says. And this is in a photo album called Memories. I believe it's printed on the cover. And she doesn't really flip through it that much at that time.
Yeah, I thought it was in a book.
Oh, the note's in the book, but she also picks up the photo album. The book is a book about
spiritualism.
Spiritualism.
Yeah.
Which she doesn't investigate at this time. She just kind of puts it down. And
it's like, basically.
So she goes to leave the room, and she sees a shadow in the corner of the room. And then this is one of the great parts of the cinematography is a lot of it's really harsh lighting, and so you see something there, and then your eyes adjust, and you can see that it's her mother is standing there in the corner of the room, just smiling at her. And there's no stinger music. There's no no, nothing like that. She's just there.
There's no cutaway because what happens next is they flip the light on and she's gone.
She turns the light on and it's edited perfectly. As soon as the light comes to its full power, the vision or apparition is gone.
Yeah.
And then she leaves the room and goes to her husband and says, I know this sounds crazy, and then it cuts to him locking the door with the skeleton key.
Yeah. Which then leads to the phone call.
Right. So then there's a phone call, and they're like, who is it? And the son says it's the cemetery, right?
Yeah.
He hands the phone to him. We don't hear, it's a one-sided conversation. We only hear the father's side. And
basically he's for his first thing he says is, it's only been a week, right? And then there's, he obviously whoever's on the other line saying something, he goes, what do you mean by desecration? Mm-hmm. So what we learned out later on, might as well jump to that, is that the grandmother's body's been dug up.
Yeah, somebody stole the grandmother's body.
Yeah.
And so Annie says to her husband, who was that on the phone? And he's like, she knows at the cemetery what they want. Oh, just some billing crap.
Yeah.
And so he immediately lies to her from square one. And really, I think in many ways, him lying to her there really kind of starts a small snowball of, so now, from now on, all these secrets are being kept from different characters.
Yeah. And he did it, I can understand why he did it, but still, he did keep a secret from her. And then she immediately goes and says, hey, I'm going to the movies. He doesn't get to the movies.
Yeah, so I think that we're not privy to this, but it feels that we've come in to their lives at a point where there already is stress in their marriage, even before her mother died. So she says she's going to the movies.
Yeah.
And so he just lied to her. She directly lies to him back and goes to a support group for people who have lost their loved ones.
Yes.
Any of you who have seen Fight Club, it's the same kind of thing. It's a water cooler, circle of chairs in a gymnasium somewhere where people express their feelings. And so she's uncomfortable to go in, but she does go in, and then we get one of the greatest shots in the movie. You want to explain that?
Yeah, it's basically starts out as they're pretty far away, and it's focused on her. But what happens is, as she's talking about her feelings, it just slowly pans in on her, or zooms in on her slowly. And the closer it gets to her, the more crazy things that she's basically saying. She's explaining about how her father died from starvation before she was born, or right after she was born, how her mother has DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, and dementia, and that her brother committed suicide by hanging himself in the grandmother's room
when he was 16 years old,
because the grandmother was putting spirits into him. So, and it's great. It's the more closer it gets, the more crazy and crazy it sounds. And then they do this quick reverse shot to everybody in the thing, and they're all staring at her horrified.
It's interesting to me. I don't know if it was intentional. Let me ask you that. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but yeah, we start out with her just talking about whatever, my mother died a week ago, and she was very controlling, and she was, we had a terrible relationship, and she tried to, take my son away from me, and I wouldn't let her have him, and then she tried to take my, daughter away, and it just keeps going down into this madness.
Yeah.
And then it pulls away, and everybody's just like, the fuck? And I laughed out loud, because I don't know if that was an intentional point of levity or not, because there's not many points of levity in this movie. It's very dark.
Yeah. And she also mentioned that her mother would not let her feed Charlie.
Oh, yeah. Whenever she was around, she had to feed her. And, she just basically runs down the whole gambit of everything that's wrong in her life in like a couple of minutes. And the whole, there's like 20 people around in the circle just like gawking at her.
Yeah. Which I love. Like I said, it's just the fact that the closer it gets to her, the more insane it sounds. It's really a great scene. But then
and we also and now we know what the character's about, because she says, and I know that all this has happened and it's my fault. I feel blamed. I am blamed. And the guy who's running the group says, what are you blamed for? And she says, I don't know. Yeah. And is basically broken down at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, that's that scene. It's really good. Then I think is where they have the high school classes, right?
Yeah, we get a look into the children's lives. We see that Charlie has trouble paying attention at school. She's kind of taken after her mother in some ways. She's like making these little models on her own, like little characters, but like they're made out of like, I don't know, like pipe cleaners and like springs and like
found objects, like
there's junk found
pill
objects.
bottles and
whatever. And her teacher comes by and is like, are you finished with your quiz? And she hasn't even started it. She's just sitting there, and she's like, well, how about you do this, and you can work on your toy later.
Yep.
And then a bird flies into the classroom window and dies and falls into the bushes.
Makes a nice little stain on the window.
Right. So there's like one of our bad omens.
Yep. And she immediately looks at the scissors on the teacher's desk.
There's this like out of focus shot that's these those old school black handled scissors that every teacher has in America sitting on their desk.
Yep.
And so at some point she steals those scissors and goes outside and like scopes out the situation and no one's looking around, and then uses the scissors to decapitate the bird.
Did you see what candy bar she's eating though at the time?
Yeah, she's also she's
eating a Dove bar, which is a bird.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I knew she was eating a chocolate bar, but it says Dove.
It's Dove.
It's funny. That's gross because she's eating and decapitating this bird at the same time, essentially.
Yeah.
Then she like turns around to make sure no one saw her. Then like across the street, like I don't know, like a football field away, there's this like iron fence, and there's this woman just watching her.
Yeah, and waving.
And she like waves at her like slightly or raises her hand.
Like real shyly almost.
Yeah, and then the scene cuts.
Yeah. And then Peter's class is very interesting too. Because they're talking about basically, I guess it's, I think it's, was it Socrates? Story of
Heracles.
Heracles but it was written by somebody.
Yeah,
I think it's Socrates.
So it's talking about the themes of that story, which I'll let you tell us about that, but it's a theme of this film as well.
And basically the teacher, which if you ever watch horror films and there's a classroom and they're talking about something, it's probably important to the plot, so you may want to listen to it.
Sometimes it's irrelevant. It depends on the movie.
But for the most part.
But yeah, so the teachers it's a history class or a philosophy class. I'm not sure which. It could be English. I don't know. But
they're talking about fate.
Right.
And is it more tragic if you cannot change your fate, or is it less tragic? Because Hercules was given signs that these things were going to happen, but he couldn't change his fate. And that's another point of levity with the kid.
Oh yeah, the kid raises his hand. And he's like, or the teacher's like, is it
more or less
more or less tragic if they have control? And he says that it's less tragic.
She goes,
why? He goes, because
it's real strange. It's like out of place almost.
Yeah, it is a good portion of like one of the few laughs you're going to get in this film.
Yep. And Peter's looking at the girl's butt in front of him. He's real distracted, and he gets a text message from his friend saying, "Do you want to go smoke some weed?" Basically,
right?
Under the bleachers. And he's like, "Yeah, we'll do it."
And so that establishes kind of what he's doing with his life, and then there's a girl somewhere off screen who answers the question the teacher posed and says that it's more tragic because everything bad that was going to happen was inevitable, and that nobody could do anything to fix it.
And that's what happens in this film.
And that's exactly what happens in this film.
Yep.
I pointed out to you when we were watching it, there were a couple points where maybe things could have gone differently, but this film is one of there's a lot of films, but this one especially rewards you for rewatching.
Yeah.
You will see things that you didn't see before. You say you watched it, like 5 or 6 times now?
Yeah, I think it's 6 times now.
And you're still noticing things?
Still notice different things that I might have missed the first few times.
The layers of how the story is put together, like everything's there. And you do have to do some work to put it together, but a lot of it's like given visually and different things, and it's extremely well done in that manner. And I guess the Heracles story is like a parallel to this, but it's also, I don't think it's a permanent thesis. It leads to you to decide whether these things were inevitable and what is that more tragic or not.
Yeah.
I think I'm on the fence about that. And I do think there maybe were a couple times where things could have went differently, but as you learn that the things that are put in motion have been, a decades-long plan.
Yeah. I'm thinking that there was even like backup plans for everything.
Probably contingencies.
In fact, there was one where a backup plan was put in place, and we'll go into that later on.
So I guess we're probably ready to go to the party.
Yeah, because that's where it starts out with Charlie in a room finishing up her miniature of the bird head.
Yeah,
which I need to watch that scene again because I've heard some things, but
so Charlie has this decapitated bird head that is now like she's using it as like a head to like one of these little dolls that she's made, and it's like a macabre version of the dioramas her mother makes.
Yeah,
and then for the first time we see what could be something like supernatural. There's like this weird like lens flare kind of glow.
It's like a light,
That light that comes into the room and lures her out into the backyard.
Yeah.
And so she's kind of walking out there in this like overgrown grassy field, like trance-like, holding this decapitated bird head.
Yeah.
And in the distance, she sees her grandmother like kneeling down in a circle of flames.
Yeah. And at that time, Peter's fighting with his mom. But during that, it's definitely a vision. It's not real. Because
she doesn't see it.
Yeah, the mother doesn't see it. So, and he doesn't when she comes out to get Charlie and stop her from just walking out there in bare feet.
Yeah, that's the thing she's mad about is that this I guess takes place in like maybe the early fall.
Yeah.
And she's out there in her bare feet, and her mother just grabs her shoulder. And in a lesser movie, this would be like some cheap jump scare.
Yeah.
But it's not. Like I said, there's no over dramatic music or anything like that. She like wrenches her by the shoulder.
Oh yeah.
And, like
manhandles her
back to the house. Meanwhile, she doesn't have any clue that there's this decapitated bird head in her daughter's pocket.
Yeah. Or that there's a big, huge fire out in their field.
Right, or she's seen some ghostly vision of her mother.
Yeah.
So now 2 people have seen the mother.
Yep. And right before that, Peter gets a text from his friend saying, "Hey, there's this party.
There's a party. Bring your dick."
Yeah, bring your dick. So that's a little bit of humor there too. bring your dick. So he goes to his mom and says, hey, I need to borrow one of the cars. And the mother immediately goes, oh, well, you know, why do you need the car? And there's a school barbecue that I want to go to. And the mother's like, oh, there's not going to be any drinking there?
Yeah, that's like the most passive-aggressive conversation.
And then he answers another question like, well, we couldn't even get alcohol if we went to, right?
Right. She's like, that's bullcrap. Are you drinking?
Well, didn't I just say no? So that's basically the scene. And
she basically pressures him into taking Charlie with him to this school party, almost as like a punishment.
Like to maybe stop him from doing anything.
Yeah, so he can have the car and go, but now that Charlie's there, you got to be on your best behavior. Absolutely no drinking or anything like that. So
which would never have worked anyways.
He begrudgingly takes her.
Yeah.
And it's clear that she doesn't want to go.
Yeah.
She's like, who's going to be there? She's like, people from school. She's like, I don't know anybody. She's, you know, she's not a social person.
It's like, fine. It's real abrupt. Fine. And that's it.
Yeah. So the fact that she and her brother are going to this party is a begrudging decision on three people's parts, right? Yeah. Nobody wants this to go down the way it's going down, but that's what happens.
Yeah. And then there's a great visual storytelling part where they're driving to the party. And as you'll see later, there's a telephone pole. It's very important. And as they're speeding by, it abruptly stops on that telephone pole, almost like you hit that telephone pole.
Yeah, it's like we're dollying past the pole at the speed of a car, and then the car keeps going, and we stay with the pole for a few seconds, and we see that engraved on the pole is this design that to me kind of looks like a harp.
It's like three people, I think, or three candles.
Yeah, it's three like squiggles, and it's kind of hard to make out, but if you've been paying attention before, you'll notice that every time we've seen the mother, both her ghost and in her casket and in the picture at the funeral, she's wearing this gold necklace that has a pendant that is the same.
And Annie has one too.
Oh yeah, the daughter has one. I guess the mother must have gave it to her.
Yeah.
That's this weird, it's an occult symbol.
Yeah.
Which we don't know at the time. So they go to the party, and the party opens up with some loud music, and then we like pan over to the kitchen, and there's these girls chopping nuts frantically
like a billion nuts, like more nuts than you would ever need for it.
It is a lot of nuts, and they're making a cake.
Yeah.
Who I've heard some people be like, I heard some people be like, why are like, this is a high school party and they're drinking and smoking dope, like who's over there like making cake? I don't know.
Yeah.
Home ec club.
Yeah, making nut cake, as I heard.
Some people have some kind of problem with that. Yeah. It doesn't bother me. It's whatever. And so Peter finds this girl that he was staring at her butt in class.
Yeah.
And asks her if she wants to smoke some weed.
Yep. And then they go up to the room, but before he can, Charlie's like, I want to go with you. And he's like, no, I need you to stay here for a few minutes, and then we'll hang out. She's like, I don't want to be by myself. And he goes, well, look, they're making cake. She goes, they're not going to give me a piece. And then he's like, yeah, just go over there. It's chocolate. She loves chocolate.
She's like, I don't know anybody. She's like, no. He's like, nobody knows anybody. It's a party. The cake's for everybody. Just go over there and get you a piece of cake. Which, like, you know, on its surface, it kind of seems like a good idea because you don't want, like, your younger sister around while you're smoking pot and all that. And, but it turns out to be a terrible decision.
Yeah, it is.
So he's up there smoking weed with the girl he's kind of crushing on.
He goes into the room. The funny thing is, thought he was going up to this room with her by herself.
Right, there's a bunch of people
There's two guys in there, and they're watching a black and white movie that has a guillotine in the back, and the blade drops. So it's another decapitation, which is a huge theme of this movie.
Right.
So, but he walks in, there's these two other guys, and she's like
this is Peter's got weed.
Peter's got weed.
Right.
And they're like, and they're starting to talk about the sister, and the one dude's like, is she hot? But, yeah, so...
Spoilers, she's not.
Yeah, no, she's not, but...
She looks like a little troll.
But, so she eats the cake, she's there trying to do some of her artwork, Charlie is, and her throat starts swelling up.
Yeah, so we cut to some times went by, and his sister comes in the room and says she can't breathe, and she's like having like little spasms, and then like he immediately. So now we know that she ate the cake. We've established the girls chopping nuts downstairs, and the parents talking about the EpiPen.
Yeah.
You know, in prior scenes. So he immediately, without hesitation, scoops her up, puts her in the car, and speeds away.
Tries to get home, yeah.
Right, tries to. I guess he's going home or to the hospital. I don't know. He never makes it there.
Yeah, no. So she's having a hard time breathing. He rolls down the window to get more air in there, and she sticks her head out the window.
Yeah, so she's coughing, and the wind's flying, and he's doing like 80 miles an hour. And then we get a quick cut back to that same telephone pole with the.
There's a deer in the road.
Oh, that's right. Go ahead.
The deer in the road, so he's like going too fast. He swerves towards the telephone pole. And with her head out the window, you can imagine what happens next.
We get a brutal decapitation of a child.
Yes.
It's like two frames. It's very quick, but the gore is there.
Yeah.
It's very quick. And then, I don't know, maybe 20 yards past the pole, he slams on the brakes.
Yeah.
And we just get this uncomfortable, I don't know, like 30 seconds or a full minute of him just...
Yeah, he wants to look back, but he can't.
He's frozen behind the wheel with his foot on the brake. We're in the car with him. He's like has labored breathing. He's like trying not to look in the rear view mirror. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And we don't see the head or anything else right now. It's all just about him, like, and you as an audience member, like, holding your breath. You're like, holy shit, I can't believe that just fucking happened.
And it's sort of like, because if you did watch the trailers, you thought this movie was going to be about this creepy little girl, and she's dead already. It's almost akin to, like, a Psycho moment where you have this character you think the movie's going to be about, or is going to be a main part of the movie, and she's dead.
And like Psycho, this happens about... 30 or so minutes in, the movie's been going on for a while, and we really don't know what it's about. Yep. And we still don't. Yep. This is, between that lie the husband told earlier and between this episode, this is where things really start picking up and getting out of control.
Yeah.
So after this uncomfortable silence, he just kind of slowly idles off.
Yeah, they show him lifting his foot off the brake slowly, and just
kind of putts away, and then goes home, parks the car in the driveway, gets out, and this whole thing is like he's a zombie, right?
Yeah, he lays down.
He just goes into the house, meanders, lays down, and it's kind of slow motion. There's this nice like side the cinematography here, like the camera like tilts and lays down with him, and you just see his face, and then like we're just stuck in his face. Morning comes.
Yeah, it's like instantly changes the morning. Like he hasn't moved the whole time.
So he's been just laying there, stunned, with his eyes wide open for all night, and now it's morning, and you hear in the background his mother talking about, I'm just going to go to the store to buy some boards. She's going to the art store to get stuff for her project, and I'll be back in 20 minutes, and you hear like just Foley of her going downstairs, her opening the door, her going to the car, and then just screaming.
Screaming, yes. It's just this wail.
What? Yeah.
That's the best way to do it, and it just goes on and on.
And you hear her screaming as like he's just staring you in the face, and because in the camera,
you can't process it.
He can't process. Nobody can, and so that screaming transitions her. Now we're in the bedroom with her, and it's been some time has gone by, and she's still screaming.
Which is another foreshadowing. If you see the position she's in on the floor. Yeah, she's like down on her knees and her head's are pressed to the ground. She's crying, I want to die, I want to die.
Yeah, it's like a praying position. She's slamming on the floor. Oh, Charlie, I want to die. It hurts so bad. See, this screaming goes on for
in fact,
an uncomfortable amount of time.
They cut away from her and actually showed Charlie's head on the side of the road covered in ants. While she's screaming, it's almost like the head itself is screaming. And the weird thing about it is...
Well, can I I want to bring something up. So, like, the camera is on her in the bedroom for a while, pounding the floor and screaming, and the husband's, like, rubbing her back, trying to... There's nothing anybody can do.
No.
She is hysterical. And we slowly leave the room, and Peter's walking down the hallway, and he's just standing there listening to it. And, like, to me, that, like, it kind of brought a small tear to my eye, because, like, she's screaming, Charlie, oh Charlie, oh Charlie, and here he is, and like, you know, it's like, what about me?
Yeah.
You know, like he's like
devastated.
Yeah. And no one can do anything for him.
Yeah.
And then the screaming continues, and we cut to
the head. Yeah.
Charlie's decapitated head on the side of the road, who has its mouth like twisted open in this rictus of pain, and it's like her screaming is overlaid, you know, over this footage, and there's all these ants eating her face. And
her head is also tilted on its side like Peter's was, where it has the dead-looking eyes. Because like Peter, when he's laying down, looked like he was dead. Basically.
Right, he had that 100,000-yard stare, right?
So it's like almost like an opposite of what Peter was dealing with. Like her head was on the ground too. And then it goes right into the screaming's continuing, and it's the
funeral, right?
And then they show the small casket slowly lowering into the ground.
Yeah, everybody at the funeral, and there's not a lot of people, less than 20, I would say. That's kind of like a medium far shot. We can see everybody, and she's just doubled over, screaming and screaming and screaming, and everybody else just has like this blank, dead expression. And
once again, Peter's away from his parents. There's a gap between them,
right?
And it's almost like he's isolated at that point.
Which I think that they were kind of isolating themselves before this, but I think this is like, now we've firmly put a wedge between this family that they're never going to be able to repair.
Yeah. Then I think it goes right to, he goes back to school. They're talking about the Great Depression. Boy, that's not subtle at all. Because there's depression in the movie, obviously, with the loss of the child. And he's out there smoking with his friends, and he starts, like, he can't breathe like his sister couldn't. It's a small little clip.
Yeah, it's only like a maybe 1 minute scene, but it shows you that, like, he is, like, having, you know, to me, this is nothing supernatural. It's survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
You know, like he's having he's smoking pot with his friends, and they're all laughing, and then one of them turns to him and is like, dude, are you okay? And it's like, he's like, I can't breathe, and he's like, just hold me. Yeah. And like, he holds his hand, and he's like crying, and like, you know, he's like, his mother's inconsolable, and basically the father's doing all that he can to help her.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, he's grieving, but there's nobody to help him.
Yeah. And then she wants to get to the movies again so she can go to the grief counseling. But this time, when she goes there, she doesn't go in. She's about to drive off. And that's when
she meets Joan.
Joan, who runs out in front of her car to stop her.
So this little lady comes out, and she's like, hey, I recognized you from a couple months ago. Are you doing better?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I know that, there's no doing better. But she explains to her that, it helps to talk to somebody. And this character is really the only character outside the family who has any meaningful role.
Yeah.
This Joan character is played by Ann Dowd, who has, I was looking up her filmography, and she's in Handmaid's Tale and a couple other things, but I never recognized her before. She has one of those faces, I'm like, I know I've seen her, but she's a great actress in this, isn't she?
Yeah.
She really sells it, but especially because she's playing like a dual role.
Yeah, like, what is she helping or is she hurting? That's the thing with her.
So she's gets Annie to tell her confess that her daughter just died, and she doesn't know what to do, and Joan tells her that my grandchildren just drowned a couple months ago.
My son and my grandson.
Yeah, just drowned a couple months ago, and it doesn't get any better, obviously, but it maybe helps to know that there's other people that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And then if you ever need anybody to talk to, here's my number. I know it's weird, but sometimes talking to a stranger is the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
So she reluctantly takes the paper.
Yeah.
And then
drives off
and never goes into the meeting.
And then I think it comes up on the best scene of the movie soon, which is the dinner scene.
Right.
And I mean, to me, I really thought there was going to be an Academy Award for Tony for this scene. I was very disappointed.
This movie kind of flew under the radar. Worldwide, to date, it's made $79 million.
Yeah.
The budget has not been released on the picture. I don't know what they spent on it. They couldn't have spent more than maybe 30.
Yeah.
So it might have doubled its money, but I don't know. I have a feeling that a lot of people were like me and thought,
Yeah.
it doesn't look like anything I'm interested in. Also, it came out in June.
Yeah.
Which is not a good time for a horror film to come out.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was up against that time. I should have looked that up, but summer when you're a small picture like this going against summer blockbusters, your outcome's not going to be very good. But I think this is definitely going to get a cult following as time goes on.
Yeah. So basically, the husband comes home, goes up into the studio, and you see Annie there making a miniature of the car accident scene.
He's like, Jesus God, what are you doing? You're not going to let him see this. She's like, who? He's like, Peter.
This is one of the greatest. Well, it's the neutral view of the scene. Like, it's not from anybody's perspective.
Yeah,
I guess she thought that explained it.
Yeah, and at this point, you're like, wow, she's really gone off. Like, she's made this detailed diorama all the way down to the severed head on the side of the road. And when he catches her doing this, like, she's painting the blood coming out of her daughter's neck stump.
Yeah. It's exactly.
And you're just like, wow, she's lost it.
Yeah, you see the headless body with the arm hanging out of the window.
Right. And, he's like, dinner's ready. She's like, I'm making dinner. He's like, no, I made dinner. It's ready. Come down or don't. I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, basically what he says. So you go downstairs. It's very awkward silence.
I find it hard to come up with another example in another film of a scene that's as uncomfortable as this one.
It is. It's very like, we should not be here watching this.
Oh my God, it is so like I'm holding my breath.
Yeah.
Because like they're all just like, it's like 30 seconds of just scraping forks and plates and clinking, like dead silence. And then the son's like, dinner's good, Dad. And he's like, thank you. And like she like scoffs like under her breath.
And it's like the fuse has been lit.
It's like, oh God. He's like, you got something to say, Mom?
Yeah, you need to
get something on your mind?
Yeah.
Well, she does.
Yep. But it does. She really tries to hold off, but then he's like, why don't you just fucking tell me? Basically, he swears at her, and that was it. She went crazy.
Yeah, she's like, don't you fucking swear at me. I'm your mother. She's like, I can't say nothing to you because you
get that.
You sneer at me with that face on your stupid face, and like, she just goes off, and then we cut to the father who's like just flabbergasted. And
then because he's like, you could have said you were sorry, but you didn't, and now I can't forgive you, and I will not forgive you. And then the son comes back and goes, you made her go to the party.
Well, yeah, but the interesting thing about this dialogue is like she has like, I don't know, like a 2 or 3 minute tirade of just her screaming, and it begins with, I know it was just an accident, and all the way to, it's your fault. Yeah. But she also keeps saying, I want to protect you. Right. I think subconsciously as a mother she does. Right. It's everything she says is, well, it's a knife and it's double-edged. It's like, this is for your own good. I want to protect you, but at the same time, you fucked up and this is all your fault, and now you've ruined our family, and there's nothing we can do. She's like, at least if something good could come out of Charlie's death, it would be that me and you could put the pieces back together, but I can't even look at your fucking face. Because what you don't know yet is that there's tension between them before all this even happens. Right. Which is, I mean, I think that through the cinematography and through the way that we are introduced to these characters, that tension's felt. Yeah. We don't know what it is, but we know that this isn't a happy family necessarily. Yeah. And so, then like he stabs her back even harder with, what about you? Why can't you take responsibility? It's your fault for making her come with me to that party. Yeah. And then like it gets so heated to the point you're like, oh, this is going to become physical maybe. Yeah. And then when the father finally steps in, he's like, enough. Yeah. That's enough. We're not doing this anymore. Yeah. And she like tries to keep going, and then finally she's like, fine, and just storms off. Yeah. And then now, the camera does its voyeuristic thing. We're pulled back like 20 feet from the table, like we're sitting, like we're in like another room. Yeah. seeing them in the dining room, just sitting there quietly, and he reaches out and touches his son's hand.
Yeah.
And he then, like, the father puts his head in his hands, and you know that, like, he's supposed to be this strong supporter, and, like, he doesn't have the tools
Yeah.
to deal with the situation.
Yeah. He's the one that's trying to protect his son still, I think, just as much as the mother is, even though it doesn't look like she is. I think she's still trying to protect her son. I don't think she can express that. So.
And so, basically, after this dinner fiasco, the whole story comes off the rails, right? Like,
yeah.
it really goes poof.
Yeah.
So she goes to the mother goes to the art store, right?
No, it's not quite yet.
No?
No, what happens next is she's doing her models upstairs, and the paint spills.
Oh, that's
Then she sees the number, because she doesn't touch his paint. We know it's manipulated by something. There's a light in the corner, which we think is Paimon, which we'll get into later. Swoops down, knocks the paint over. Hits the piece of paper that happens to have Joan's number on it.
Right.
She goes to Joan's house, mentions, hey, I noticed your doormat. My mom used to embroider that. And Joan goes, well, isn't that funny? Right?
Right.
And then she's in there, and that's where the story about the sleepwalking comes out.
Yeah, so there's this theme in the story about sleepwalking, and she goes to Joan for exactly what Joan invited her for, was to get things off her chest.
Yeah.
And she tells this perfect stranger that she has a history of sleepwalking, though it hasn't happened for years, she claims.
Yeah.
And says that when the children were both young enough to sleep in the same room, so this is probably like maybe a decade ago or so, she had poured paint thinner on them and poured paint thinner on her, and then struck a match
While she was sleepwalking.
And striking the match both woke her up and woke Peter up, and he was screaming, and then she immediately put the match out. Yeah. So this tells the audience that this is the wedge that's been in the family from the beginning, and this is why her and him have a terrible relationship, because she feels bad because she was sleepwalking, so she wasn't responsible for it, and that he can never forgive her, and there's nothing that she can ever do to make up for it because it happened.
Yeah. It's not like you can go back in time and make it not happen.
Right, so she confesses this, and so this puts, I think, a little kernel of doubt in the audience's mind to this character's sanity.
Yeah.
You know, between this omission and between her doing the diorama of her decapitated daughter.
Yeah, it's almost like a micro scene of the support group. That's how I looked at it.
I agree. It's just a little bit further into this.
It's like, oh, something even more crazy just came out.
Right. And that's really what that scene's about, right?
Yeah. So
her and Joan part ways admirably, and you can see that there's like a friendship building there.
Yeah. And then it goes to plan A, what I'm going to call plan A. Is they're back at the house, and you see this little thing slip into the mail slot. It says something about a seance or a spiritualist is coming to town, and you can see it just slid in with their mail, because their mail was already there. Somebody slid it in
after the mailman had come.
Yes, so that's
probably Joan
or one
of the other
people.
Occultists. There's a cult. There's a cult in this movie, and
I've been trying to hold it off as long as you can, but you can't.
There's a cult in this movie. That creepy man who was at the beginning of the funeral was part of the cult.
Yeah.
The woman who waved across the street when Charlie was decapitating the bird, part of the cult.
Yeah.
And they're like sprinkled throughout this picture, and like it's one of those things that you probably won't notice till the second watch.
Yep.
Or you might notice one of them, but you realize that both the cult and the spirit of the mother and this demon called Paimon, who the stories, is that how it's pronounced? Paimon, yeah. Who have this, presence in the film at all times almost.
Yeah. Yep. So it goes on for a bit. I mean, Peter sees a reflection of himself, but it's smiling at him. And I don't want to get too deep into some of these little bits, but he thinks there's we're skipping ahead too far, I think.
I don't think so.
Because I think they do Joan comes back. So I think we do need to get to that.
Well, she runs into Joan again at the Hobby Lobby or whatever.
Plan B.
Right, and this is Plan B. That coincidentally we bump into each other, and Joan she's like a real dour, like kind of like rational kind of character, and now she's like real jubilant and like, oh, you'll never believe what happened. I didn't believe it myself. Yeah. I think we can pretty much just gloss over this. She tells her that she met a spiritualist and that they performed a seance, and she was able to speak to her dead grandson, and I know how you must think. And she basically, and like Annie's like, she doesn't say anything. She just has this smirk on her face, like, lady, you're crazy. Yeah. But Joan convinces her to come over and see what's going on. Yeah.
And there's chalkboards in the back of her trunk, which
there are
I have theories on that too.
Joan is loading up chalkboards and various art supplies that she, got at the store where they coincidentally bumped into each other. Yeah. But she was probably following her. We might as well go ahead and, Joan's occultist.
Yeah. She's like the head of it.
She's one of the heads of it for sure. She was close to her mother who had died. Yeah. So she brings her over to her little apartment and they do a seance.
Yeah. And there's basically a glass that moves and it starts sliding on its own. And she goes, this is my grandson's chalkboard. It's a small chalkboard, not as big as the ones in the back of the car or truck, whatever she had. And it writes on there, the chalk by itself writes, I love you, Grandma. And it freaks, obviously, Annie out. She's like, I gotta leave.
Yeah, she's having like a panic attack trying to get out of the house. Yeah. And she's like, I know, that was my reaction the first time I seen it too, but it's real. And you can do it too. All you gotta do is read these words. And she hands her a piece of paper, and she's like, what's it say? She's like, I don't know, but the spiritualist had me read it and it worked. You just have to make sure that when you do it, that everybody knows about it at your house and their home. Yeah. When you do it, even your son.
And then there's a great shot at the end of that one where it shows
her in the
mirror. She goes, you didn't kill your daughter. She's still here.
Right.
Which, of course, it's Paimon was her daughter. Yes, he's still there. So.
Right.
So the next part is she goes home. The husband's sleeping in bed, the son's sleeping in bed, and you hear her in the bathroom saying these words, basically. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we missed anything, but
we could have. Folks, this story has a lot of nuance and visual storytelling, and I guarantee you, like you've seen it 5 or 6 times. You're still picking up on stuff. I saw a whole bunch of stuff that, like for instance, one thing we didn't mention is there's a scene where the son's smoking pot and blowing smoke out his bedroom window. Then we see smoke come in from like camera left, and you know that like there's somebody there watching the house.
They had been talking about how cold it is up there, so it's somebody's breath out in the
right. Like he's blowing out pot smoke, and there's someone's breath, and like it gives you this presence of dread that like there's always if you go back and look at the picture a second time, you can see that the cult and everything supernatural involved really is involved the whole time. Yeah. Well, because if you blink or leave the room or whatever, you're going to miss something. Yeah. And there's still things that I think that I haven't seen and things that maybe I don't even understand.
Yeah. Well, she then wakes up her son and her husband to perform a seance basically on her own. And it's way more powerful. In fact, to me, it's not a seance. It's a ritual to summon Paimon into the home.
Before we go into that, the one important scene is that, so she gets out of bed and she walks into her son's room and they get into a fight and she screams at him that I never wanted to have you, right?
Yeah, she woke up, it was a dream state. There's ants crawling all over the place.
Right, the same ants that were on Charlie's face when she was decapitated. Yeah. and it goes from like being like, is this real, to being a dream, to being, is she sleepwalking? But in this series of whatever vision it is, she confesses to him that she tried to give herself a miscarriage, and he's like, how? And she's like, everything they tell you not to do when you're pregnant, I did, and it didn't work, and I never wanted you, but my mom pushed it on me, and he's like crying, like, why did you want to kill me? Why? Like, it's really like emotional.
He says that, why are you trying to kill me? And she goes, I'm not, I'm trying to protect you, which is very important, because I think that's also why she was going to light him on fire when they were younger. Because she subconsciously knew, like, there's two states. One when she's awake, and one when she's not awake.
Well, that scene ends with them both catching fire, and then, like, she wakes up, and I think that, like, that's what spurs her to go read the ritual. Yeah,
because it's great, because they're completely dry. It keeps flashing back and forth between them. And then it's like her, and she's fine. And then it flashes back to Peter, and you can tell he's doused in paint thinner. And it flashes back to her, and her hair is all wet and doused in it. And you hear like a match strike,
it's
and,
like,
and the flames everywhere.
Right.
And then she wakes up. And then there's another.
It's both like, I like that scene because it gives us some more exposition into why the wedge is in this family, and also it's just a good scare.
Yeah.
You know, both visually and thematically, and it fits.
Yeah.
So she reads the ritual, and then rabble rouses everybody out of bed to come downstairs and gather around the table, because she'd already done this once. So there's a glass. We haven't seen it, but that's what she says. I wouldn't have brought you down here if I didn't know it worked.
Yeah.
So there's a glass on the table and a candle, and they're all groggy. It's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and they're like, what's going on?
And the dad's so cut out of it, he doesn't realize what's going on, but Peter can understand what's going on, because can't you feel the air flexing? So.
Well, yeah, and she's like, my friend Joan. He's like, Joan who? Like, what are you talking about?
She's, I'm a medium. So she says.
Yeah, he's like, what?
So he thinks she's insane, of
course.
Right.
Which, I mean, right, yeah, you would think that. I mean, I don't blame him.
Yep.
You know, he's the only one that is like the grounded, like, straight man, you know, in this movie to be, you know, nothing supernatural has happened to.
Yeah. And then the glass slides across the table on its own. And she's trying to call Charlie up, you know, hey, you know, Charlie, are you here? Please speak to us. And then there's this big, the flame in the candle.
Yeah, the flame gets like 3 feet high and then goes out and then goes back to normal.
Yeah.
And then like a Cheerio cabinet, like in the background.
Like something breaks in it.
Something smashes in it.
And then it's just a picture of her from like almost like the waist down, and you hear this growling noise. Like, and then it comes up, and then she starts talking in Charlie's voice. Like, why is everybody so scared? Where am I? What's going on? You know? And
she's like, Mommy, like yelling out, like,
Daddy, Peter. And then Peter's freaked out, terrified.
Yeah, he's like having a mental breakdown.
Yep.
And then like the father's like trying to shake her out of it, and then like he runs and leaves the room.
Yeah.
And then comes back and then douses her with a glass of water.
It's like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like she didn't even know what happened to her, basically.
Right.
And before this, though, Charlie's sketchbook, actually, there were new pictures drawn in it. Which
she claims.
Yeah. But it happens later on, though.
It does happen later on, but at that time, the audience doesn't know this. The father, me, am identifying with the father because I'm like, well, I didn't see this, and you're crazy.
Yeah.
Although I think part of him knows and doesn't want to believe it, because just a day or so ago he was flipping through the sketchbook and saw the last picture,
which was the bird's head.
Yeah. And clearly there is new pictures in there.
Yeah. So that starts the chain where Peter's being basically haunted by the spirit of Paimon. He's in school. He sees the reflection smiling back at him. The mother, obviously, you know, you got Annie going, seeing the book draw pictures of Peter with its eyes crossed out. It's very strange. So she's like, I think she tries to burn the book first.
Yeah, she's home alone and tries to burn the notebook.
Yeah.
And so we have all these additional pictures that are added. of they're all of the son Peter like screaming or in various like his mouth's open or he just looks like he's being tortured and he has like crosses, his like eyes are like gouged out or whatever. So she decides to burn the book in the fireplace. Yeah. And it starts to catch on fire, and her arm starts to catch on fire too. Yeah. And then so she drags out of the fireplace and stomps on it, puts the fire out, and the fire on her shirt also goes out.
Yeah, instantly.
Right. So now we know that these two things are connected.
Yeah. And then she goes to Joan's house. She goes to Joan's house to see, just like something's wrong with this, you know.
Yeah, she realizes now that she's opened a door that she doesn't understand, and there's something evil in the house. Yeah.
Which is another great shot where she's walking down the hallway, but the camera is upside down, and she looks like she's walking on the ceiling.
And then it like
it's foreshadowing again.
It pivots like 180 and follows her.
And then she gets to the door and it's just banging on the door repeatedly, right? Which is more foreshadowing.
Right. Joan's not home, and we get a tracking shot away from the door on the inside of the apartment, and then over to Joan's dining room table where they had previously performed the seance. And now there's a triangle carved into the wood of the table, which is also the same triangle that was carved in the mother's bedroom when she was in hospice.
Yeah, we didn't mention that.
Well, it's irrelevant until you see this.
See this, yeah.
And so on the table inside the triangle is a photograph of Peter with the eyes gouged out, and various. Like it's almost like a diorama, like various things that the little girl had made. Yeah. Like that little doll that she had made out of junk and springs and whatever is there, and other stuff from her bedroom, which I really would need to like freeze frame that shot and like figure out like what all that stuff is. Yeah. But it goes to show you that the cult has been inside the house at least once.
And the symbol is also there too. I don't know if we mentioned that. The Paimon symbol, the necklace symbol, is up on the wall in Joan's house. They also zoom out, and she had like a little thing that was opened up, and it's in there. Mm-hmm. So that's that scene. So
she can't burn the book. So then she starts going through her mother's stuff more, right?
Yes.
And she goes back to that memory book, which I mentioned before, and starts flipping through it, and then finds all these really creepy pictures of her mother with all these people, and they all have that necklace on. And there's this one that like really like it reminded me of The Wicker Man or like some of these other pagan movies, like maybe Rosemary's Baby or something. Like the old woman, her mother's on her knees with her hands up, and all these cultists are around her like throwing gold coins down on her. You know, like these are the rewards she's going to get in the afterlife for her service to this demon. Yeah. And she sees pictures of Jones like in there and all these pictures, and this is when she realizes that she's been duped.
And there's also pictures of the grandmother with her eyes are actually, it looks like they blacked them out. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like very evil looking pictures of the grandmother.
So things are starting to fall into place. She goes up to the attic. Yeah. And there's all these flies up there, and she finds a corpse of her mother that's been decapitated, and there's a candle burning between her feet that looks like it hasn't been lit but not too long ago. Yeah. And then on the wall of the attic is that same symbol we've been seeing with the three things painted in blood. Yeah. And then we go to the school. Yeah.
And also during that time, the husband's typing out to his friend because he's a psychiatrist. They don't really explain this too much. You can tell by his email address as he's typing that he's a psychiatrist.
He's part of the National Psychiatry Association, who he's sending this letter to,
saying that his wife is basically insane,
needs help, and it looks to me like he's reaching out to a colleague or something to guess because he's like I said. He's used all the tools that he has nothing left to do anything. He's really at the end of his rope. And so, meanwhile, at school, probably like the latter stages of what is the possession of Peter starts to take effect. So, like, he goes into like this contortion, like his hands start to contort, he starts to lose motor function, like I don't know how much of this is digitally manipulated or just the actor. It looks to me to be mostly practical, but it almost looks like he had a stroke.
Yes.
Like half his face is like drooping and the other side is like curled up.
Yeah.
His one eye is all red and bloodshot, and he's like foaming at the mouth.
And his arm is like twisted behind him.
Yeah, his arm's like twisted at an awkward angle, and like the teacher's teaching, and like everything just stops, and everybody's just looking at him, and then he's just like, bam, 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 starts smashing his face into his desk and breaking his nose, and throws himself out of the chair, screaming. All the kids like back up and run away because they're like freaking out. And he's just on the floor, cradling himself, just screaming.
Yeah. And they try to call the mother. The mother's distraught because she just found the body.
Right. This is all, like, the way it's cut is, like, basically the father's at work, the mother is digging through her mom's possessions and then finding the body, and the boy's at school being possessed. All this is happening at the same time. Yeah. And so the school calls the dad at work. Yeah. And he goes and picks him up.
Oh, we also missed the scene where Joan was screaming at him from across the street. But Peter's at school sitting on a bench outside.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. This is just before that possession scene.
Yeah, it's like, get out.
Yeah, it's like she's saying all these, like, magic words. And it's kind of like that same scene when Charlie sees the woman across the street. Yeah. It's, like, framed up kind of the same way. She's real far away. And, like, I like what they do with the audio. It's like all the other, like, it's like lunchtime. Yeah. And so, like, all the kids in the quad or whatever are, like, talking, and, like, you hear indistinct chatter, and then, like, all that, the sound washes out. Yeah. And you just hear, like, her voice, like, booming over everything else, and, like, into his mind, like it's like she's casting his soul out of his body. She's like, get out, get out.
Yeah, and nobody else notices her because he's looking around. It's like, has anybody else seen this crazy woman across the street yelling at me?
Right.
Because he doesn't know who she is.
No, he's never seen her.
So
nobody has except for Annie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he gets possessed. Yeah. And the father brings him home. Yeah. And the mother meets him in the driveway, and she's like, "You got to come see this. You got to. I figured it out." She's like, talking like a lunatic. Yeah. And at this point, like, he is like ready to have her committed, right? He's done with her. Like, he can't stand her lunacy. He pulls up, and they together carry him in because Peter's comatose. Yeah. He has bandages and like a metal splint thing on his nose. Yeah. They tuck him into bed, and so now she starts rambling all the things that we have learned as an audience, that it wasn't the ghost of Charlie. And also, we didn't mention this, but there's a really cool scene where Peter sees Charlie in his room.
Oh yeah.
And her head falls off.
It turns into a Nerf ball.
Yeah, it's a really neat scene. Yeah. It's not like super relevant to the story. It's just it's a neat scare. But anyway, so she starts rambling. You know, I've opened this door. I've let this thing in. My mother knew it all along. She's been setting this up. I met this woman Joan, and they've known, and
I know how to stop it.
And I know how to stop it. And he's like looking at her like, what? And then she ends it all with, and there's a decapitated body in our attic who I think might be my mother.
So he goes upstairs.
So he's looking at her. This kind of made me laugh. He's looking at her. He pulls the ladder down to the attic, right? He's like, he kind of like recaps real quickly what she just said, and he's like, there's a body in the attic and it's decapitated. That might be your mother. Anything else I should know about?
Yeah, is there anything else other than the decapitated body in her? Right. And he goes upstairs.
Well, it's funny because, like, when there was some scenes before this where they had come in the house and they're like, "What's that smell?" Yeah. You know, so the body's been there, I assume, for weeks. Yeah. Since, like, it was a week after her funeral that the body got stolen from the cemetery. Yeah. And then a few weeks later that Charlie died. So, like, that body's been up there rotting for a while. Yeah. So, like, he's pulling down the ladder and he's climbing up there, and you can hear the flies buzzing, and you see his face going from, I'm just going to go up there to satisfy her curiosity and shut her up. And you can see that as he climbs like 2 foot and he can smell it, and you know that, like, he goes from not believing her to believing her like that.
As he's climbing to the attic, she's running to go start a fire in the fireplace. And as she's doing this, you hear, oh!
So he's found the dead mother, decapitated body upstairs, and he comes down and he's like, we gotta call the police. Why didn't you call them? What's wrong with you? We gotta sort this out. And then she starts rambling again about,
like, they can't help us.
They can't help us. I have to destroy this book. I tried, but I don't think I can do it. It's like, I love you, and whatever you do, you have to destroy this book.
Yeah.
And so it's the sketchbook, that Charlie had, and she has this small little newspaper fire in there, and she douses it with paint thinner and begs him and begs him and begs him, and you kind of see the look going through his face that, like, I think just like going upstairs, okay, he's going to toss it in just to shut her up and let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And she's like, I love you, and like you get the sense that like she knows that by destroying this book, she's possibly going to be destroyed as well.
Yeah.
And instead, we get a twist where he's like, no, I'm not going to give in to your psychotic episodes anymore.
Because he thinks she dug up her mother.
Yeah, he accuses her and says, I should have known before. This has been you all along. You couldn't handle it. You've lost your mind, and I'm not going to feed into you. We need to get you some help. He's very like being the doctor, being the husband. We're going to take care of this. And then she's like loses her mind and jerks the notebook out of his hand and pitches it in the fire. And like it happens so quick. It's in the fire, not even a second, and boom, he bursts. He spontaneous combust.
Yes.
Right there. And it's not a slow fire. It is.
Well, it got paint thinner on it.
I mean, on him though too. Like he just goes up so quickly, like a match, just done. And I'm like, holy shit. And then, like, my reaction to like Charlie getting decapitated, it's like the same thing. I didn't see that coming.
Yep. And then she's like horrified. She thought she was going to die.
She thought she was the one going to catch on fire. It's like now she's like screaming hysterically, and then you see that little glow again, and then like boom,
her
like
face just goes
yeah,
white.
she goes from like being grief stricken and shocked to like, Annie's not here anymore.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so later that night, Peter wakes up out of his, comatose state, and we have another one of those very well-placed shots, and the lighting is correct, of him waking up and slowly, like, Mom, Dad, it's like quiet, it's the middle of the night.
He sees the treehouse lit up.
Yeah, there's a light in the treehouse. And which is nothing new because his mother has been sleeping out there
with heat
to
lamps,
to deal with her grief. And then we see up in the corner of the room, his mother is up there like a spider.
Yeah, I did not see it the first time I seen the movie. I did not see her up there.
Oh, really?
In that corner, because I had seen so many of those shots where it just holds on people. I was looking at him the whole time.
That the first time it happened to me too. I was paying attention to him, and I didn't notice her until like it was.
She ran across the wall.
No, until it was getting ready to leave the frame. I saw her. I was like, "Oh shit!" And and so she's up there watching him, and he leaves, and he's going through the house trying to figure out what the hell's going on. He's like got some of his senses back. He's not like fully possessed at this point. He's it's trying to get into his body, and so he goes into the den and finds his father burnt to a crisp. And I don't think he knows what it is at first until there's a close shot of the wedding ring.
Yeah.
And then
he's thinking, oh, my mom tried to catch us on fire. Now my father's burned to death.
Right.
So he kind of knows his mom did it.
The camera tilts up from the wedding ring and this crispy hand to the reaction of his face and the dawn of him realizing what has happened. And then his father is dead. And then just in the very little background, you can make out his mother is hanging up there in the ceiling, like waiting to drop on him.
Yeah.
And then like he gets the sense he's being watched. You're like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And he turns, and there's something in the shadow of this doorway. And you're like, what the hell? And then this fucking naked man steps out of the doorway. and he has this huge, creepy, like demonic smile on his face.
Yeah, he's the guy from the funeral.
And he's the guy from the funeral. And so he takes off running. Peter, right?
No, he turns around and his mother's in the corner.
Oh, the other
and
corner.
And she chases him out.
So she chases him out of the room. And you want to take it from here?
Yeah, he runs down the hallway and all of a sudden the attic ladder is down somehow, even though it wasn't down before. He runs up it closes, and then he hears a pounding noise on the door because he locks it. And here it's Annie. She's clung to the ceiling, bashing her head against the ceiling.
Trying to break open the ladder door into the attic.
Yeah, and he's like, "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry." He's finally admits that he's sorry for what happened. Obviously, it's way too late at that point. And which is, like I said, a callback to where she was pounding on Joan's door after that upside down shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she's on the ceiling pounding her head against the thing. And he's like, he wakes up, he gets up, and he's looking around.
And this is like other than like the chalkboard writing on itself, and like there's like not a lot of things in this movie that are overtly supernatural.
Yeah.
This is one of them. Like she's defying gravity and like doing her Zool impression, hanging upside down, bashing her head into the door.
So he basically first of all, as he's standing up from where the attic door is, because it's in the ceiling, there's somebody behind him that, if you pay attention, it's another naked cult member. It's behind a pillar. You see arms and
you see it. Well, what I noticed was a saggy tip.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
This old,
they're all naked.
Like, they're all like, and they're not just naked. Like they're pale white as they could be, and so like they're very ghostly looking. And that was like the first time I watched this. I was like, oh, are these ghosts? Are these demons? I wasn't sure what was happening. And then you hear the noise.
Yeah, because he walks over, because he doesn't notice that person behind him. He walks over, he sees where the grandmother's body was laying before.
Yeah, there's like an outline of rot.
And then there's a picture of him with its eyes gouged out.
Where her body was.
Right? He turns around, because he hears this noise, right? And it's like a wet...
sloshing.
Yeah, we had the last time we watched it, we had the captions on, and it said squelch. I don't know what that means. It
was a wet. It was a wet squelch, and you hear this, and you see the shadow like fall on his face, right, and come over him, and he looks up, and it's like the precipice and the rafters. His mother is floating like 10 feet off the ground, and has this. It's a clay saw, which is like a steel piece of wire between two pieces of wood. It's used to cut clay, and she is vigorously sawing her own head off while just staring off into the distance. So, like, she has no control over it, and like the noise of that saw is just so like
disturbing.
It's gross. And it like cuts away from that to then now he sees that he's surrounded basically by these cult members, and it's all these old women and men that are naked, and they're like smiling and kind of giggling to each other because they know that they're so close to success. And he loses his mind and does what the girl reminded me of the scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's nowhere to run, and he just literally throws himself out the second story window.
Yeah, because before he sees his wife, he's like, wake up, and he starts smacking himself, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and he realizes that, oh shit, this is real, this is happening, there's no escape.
Yeah. And
he throws himself out the window.
Yep, so it pans down to him. You see the shadow fly up, because you hear the sawing noise. It's like, saw, and you hear a thud, because the body fell.
And the head fell off.
Yep. And then you see a shadow fly over his body because he's laying on the ground. And then the light that represents Paimon lands on his back.
Yeah,
and he
it goes into his body, and he stands up. And from his point of view, we see him standing. And we haven't mentioned it to this point, but there is a family dog.
Yeah.
You see the dog is there, not too far away from him, dead.
Yeah.
He stands up, and then he sees like that.
The headless corpse.
Well, not only that, but there are various cult members all over the yard.
Yeah.
Like crouched in the tree line or over in the scrub, like just like you see like figures and shadows, and I don't know what it is, but there's something disturbing about just naked old people standing there watching you. So the shadow that passed over his body is the floating corpse of his decapitated mother.
Yes.
Literally floating through the air and levitating up inside the treehouse. And he follows it up there and enters the treehouse. And I feel like you have more of a grasp on the ending here, so I'll let you wrap it up.
So, what is Peter's was a vessel. He goes up into the treehouse, and you see more cultists kneeling, including the decapitated grandmother and mother, facing this. Basically, it's like almost like a.
It reminds me of like what you see in Catholicism, like the Virgin Mary statue, or something like that. But
it was almost like Charlie had put something together herself.
Yeah, it's definitely homemade, but it's like a perverse like Christ. Figure.
And on top of it, for the head, is Charlie's head with a crown on it with metal spikes sticking out. And in the middle of all these naked cultists is a woman wearing a dress. We found out it's Joan, basically. She's basically the head of this cult at this time. And she goes...
I think that she was like meant to take charge after the mother had died, the grandmother had died.
And she goes, "Oh, it's okay, Charlie," because it's Charlie inside, because Charlie's been Paimon the whole time.
Right.
She says, "Oh, it's okay, Charlie," and then he goes, "You are Paimon."
She tells him that we made a mistake and you had an unfit female body.
We corrected your body.
We corrected that mistake.
Yeah.
Because we see that the mother finds in one of Annie had previously found in one of the occult books that Paimon is like one of the major demons of hell, and that he prefers a male form, and he rides around hell with 3 decapitated heads on his belt.
Yeah, and so she takes the crown off Charlie's decapitated head, puts it on Peter's head or Paimon's head, and he looks back, and where the bodies were facing the statue, or the whatever it was before, have turned around towards him. And she's like, "Hail Paimon!" And she goes through a litany of things that, hey, help us manipulate men.
Yeah, it's basically like the Satanist, the Satanist version of, what you would ask God to protect us and all this. She's saying that you will give us the control over the wills of men as we have given our will to you, and you will give us the knowledge, the unknown knowledge that we seek, that from hell.
Give us strong familiars.
And basically that we will plead you our undying loyalty for all your power.
Yeah, and I did do some research on Paimon. I don't know if it's appropriate, because Paimon is an actual documented demon. Mm-hmm. Not that it destroyed, depends on what you believe.
Right, but it's that's not, they didn't make it up for this movie. No. It's actual mythology.
And what he does is, if you summon him, he actually will give you secrets of the arts, which ties in with Charlie's love of building things and the mother, and it goes down the line there. And he'll give you riches. He's displayed as riding a camel when he has a female face with a male body. That's how he's depicted. So, but that's basically the end of the movie.
Yeah, they're all chanting, "Hail Paimon, Hail Paimon, Hail Paimon," and the camera dollies back, and we're in the treehouse, but it dollies back into an effect shot that just shows the treehouse existing basically just in a void, and it's a callback to the opening shot of the film of going into the dollhouse. Yeah. Now, this is like the diorama. That was the diorama for the beginning. This is the diorama for the end. Yeah. And the treehouse is the triangle, right? Which is like the ritualistic circle that they've been doing things in, with putting his picture in the triangle, and her mother had the triangle in her hospice bedroom, and it all comes full circle, and then it hard cuts to the end. Yeah. And the first time I seen it, I was like, wow. Yeah. It kind of left me speechless. I was like, the fact that the movie was in the theaters at all kind of surprised me because you don't really see that much stuff that deals in demonology to that. Like, I ain't talking about that Conjuring bullshit. No. I'm talking about like this is like very grounded. Yeah. Very. It's a wonder they got away with an R rating. Yeah. Really, you can kind of see some penises. Yeah. I was looking for them. I don't want to say they're done tastefully because they're not, but they're definitely there. So like, I think they pushed this to like the very edge of what you can do in an R-rated film. Yeah, pretty close.
It's the very antithesis of what horror films are in Hollywood, I would say.
I agree. If if you take a movie like, even like a lot of people like The Conjuring or, stuff in that universe, Annabelle, it's the exact opposite of that. Yeah. So, I don't know. If you're a person that, and there's nothing wrong with those movies. I'm not saying if you like them, whatever, that's fine. But it's not your traditional horror film. It's not your traditional ghost story or slasher story. There's this movie, in my opinion, belongs on a shelf next to The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Omen. Yeah. That's where this movie belongs. It's in that pantheon of occult, satanic style demon movies that are able to take the subject matter seriously and raising it up from being just a tropey kind of horror picture to being a higher form of art.
Yeah. And it's basically a story about a family, and then there's other stuff added to it.
Yeah, I mean
that's the heart of it.
The drama elements are just as important as, if not more important than the horror. Yeah. I mean, everything that happens with that table scene that we like have nothing to do with the supernatural at all. It's about this family that's dealing with this crisis, of 2 deaths in a very short amount of time, and this wound that refuses to heal. Yeah. Mainly because no one is brave enough to talk about it.
Exactly.
And a lot of, I think a big theme of this movie is secrets. And not being willing to talk about our problems. Yeah. The mother, who was the head of the cult before she died, is very secretive, and her husband keeps secrets. How differently would have things turned out if the father had told, if he had told his wife straight away that the tomb had been desecrated and the body had been stolen? Well, do you think it would have changed? I mean, the cult would have had to go to like maybe a plan C or something.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think it would have changed. And the reason why I say that is I was reading something where they had asked questions of the director, like, "Hey, what if this would have went different? Do you think this would have changed the outcome?" He goes, "No, because the theme of it is it was going to be inevitable."
Which is the theme of Heracles, which we had talked about earlier. Well, what's your opinion on it? Do you think it makes it more or less tragic if there was no escape for these characters?
It's very tragic because she fought to try to avoid it, I think she really was trying to protect her family. She just didn't know how to do it. And right. No matter what she did, it wasn't going to...
Right, and like she, like I said, I think for like all the family is very isolated from each other and from their own way. Like the mother, Annie, she has no friends or any kind of relationships outside the family that we've seen. So like, it's very logical for her to go to the stranger Joan and try to confide, because I think that she thinks that if she can get some of this stuff off her chest and become a stronger person, then she'll be in a position to help her family, right? Yeah. And it comes from a good place. Unfortunately, she was set up. Yeah.
And manipulated from the
word go, right? Yeah. Like we said, this whole plan has been put in place for decades, literally decades. So her brother hung himself at age 16 because he thought his mother was trying to put people into his body. Well, now we know, she probably was, and that plan failed. And so then the next plan was going to be to put it into Peter's body, but because of the falling out of the family, Annie wouldn't let her mother anywhere near her son. And then she had Charlie, and there's that scene, the one we didn't mention, that she's going through her stuff and she finds that an embroidered rug that says Charles
instead of Charlie,
because the whole the mother was obviously hoping for her to be a boy because the ritual only works with the male host correctly. So, but instead they were forced to maybe make a drastic decision of putting Paymon's into a vessel that wasn't really worthy of it. Yeah. And so really the cult's ultimate goal is to get Paimon out of this girl vessel and into Peter where it belongs, so they can reap the rewards of the occult knowledge that this demon has.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we could keep going on about this movie for like another hour, but
yeah, it's already been well over an hour and a half. We had a timer set up here, and I have to tell you folks, every time we try to beat this timer, it's an hourglass, and we failed yet again. Yeah. So, Brian, what would you grade this movie?
I will grade it an A+. Was my favorite movie from last year, definitely, by far.
It was also my favorite movie from last year, and I can't go as high as A+. I will give it a solid A. Yeah. I think it's a solid A. It does almost everything right. I do have a little bit of reservations. I told you before about some of the sleepwalking stuff. Yeah. Like, visually it's cool, it's somewhat interesting, but the movie's 2 hours and 7 minutes, and I think if you cut the sleepwalking stuff out of it, it wouldn't really change the story at all. We'd still have basically the same story. That's not a gripe, it's a small contention that I'm like, because anybody who knows me or has lived with me, I sleepwalk from time to time, and I think that an issue that's as complicated as sleepwalking deserves to be explored more. I don't want it to be in this story. It's more of a footnote. Yeah, it's not real. We're not really explored. So, but I think it's a solid A. It's a movie that I will revisit.
Yeah, and we barely scratched the surface on some of this stuff. Believe it or not,
I agree.
If you really want to go down the rabbit hole, look up Hereditary. What's in the tea? Which we didn't even mention that, so we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But
yeah, there's all kinds of theories. Theories with the nuts. Theories with different things, different camera angles, what cultists were in what shots. There's just a number of things. I want to give a shout out to Toni Collette, who definitely I want to see more of her. To me, this was an Oscar-worthy performance.
Yes, it was.
I believed her. It was heart-wrenching. It was heartfelt. It was just so natural. It made you feel uncomfortable because you feel like, oh, I'm like spying on something I shouldn't be seeing. Also, Ari Aster, who's the writer-director, man, for a first-time picture, he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. We'll see what he does in his second movie coming up here soon.
Yeah,
Midsommar.
Midsommar, which will be coming out sometime this summer, I imagine.
Yeah.
And it looks like it has some more pagan occult stuff going on. Definitely some Wicker Man.
Yeah, I was gonna say Wicker Man.
Definitely some Wicker Man vibes. So I'm all about that. If you're looking for a fast slasher-paced horror, you're not going to get that here. This is a slow burn dread.
Yes.
It really is, and I enjoy every minute of it. So that's all we're going to have for you today. So join us next time on the Storytellers.